Okay, hello and welcome to all of you who are joining us from around the world. We are ready to kick off our Human-Centered Design Festival on Springboard today. And for our first speaker today, we have Anna O'Reilly, who is joining us from Think Action. And she's going to discuss what is the role of human-centered design in social and behavior change initiatives. So I will turn it over to Anna.
Thanks, Heather. So I'm just going to share my slides. So hi, everyone, and welcome to this live discussion on the role of human-centered design in social and behavior change. My name is Anna O'Reilly, and I'm a designer at Think Action USA. Think Action is currently working alongside Breakthrough Action to apply HCD methods to SBC programs. I'm always keen to chat about design and HCD, so please feel free to contact me via Springboard or email. And you can also find out more about our work by visiting breakthroughactionandresearch.org or thinkplaceglobal.com. So what is the role of HCD in SBC? So that this will be the focus of today's discussion. I'm not sure if I'm going to completely answer it for you, but I do hope to open up a discussion about how we can use HCD in SBC programs. So it's really exciting to hear that Springboard Compass is showing a spotlight on human-centered design in the month of January. We've got quite a few discussions happening today on different elements of design and human-centered design. So please, I encourage you, if you have time, to join in the other sessions to learn a little bit more about HCD, please do so. As the title suggests, these sessions serve as an opportunity to share our insights, methods, and questions from the field, and to provoke discussion. So with that in mind, I encourage you to post questions and comments below for discussion. For those of you joining live, I will attempt to answer your questions during the presentation. For those of you watching the recording of this session, I'll be monitoring the comments over the next few days. So please post anything you want to add, and I will aim to reply to you as soon as possible. So to begin, a little bit about human-centered design, also called HCD. So in its simplest forms, human-centered design is an approach to solving problems that impact people. And instead of sitting in our own offices or in a boardroom discussing these problems, we go out and we speak to people who experience these problems and bring them into the design process. So human-centered design is essentially founded on the principle that the people who we are designing for should be the people who we are designing with. To do this, human-centered design brings the user's perspective into every stage of the design process, from understanding the problem space to identifying insights and opportunities, generating ideas, building rapid prototypes, testing these prototypes, and sometimes failing at these prototypes, refining and rebuilding the prototypes, retesting, and then finally formulating and implementing designs. So you may be thinking, what is the role of HCD in social and behavior change? Well, I think in simplest forms, it's a way of solving some of the great challenges we're faced in the field of social and behavior change. It's It's one method that we can use to really bring our users into the design and development process of our programs and interventions. This can help us to ensure that our programs and interventions at the end of the day meet the needs of our target audiences and key stakeholders. So the next few slides in this presentation, I just want to highlight some of the key roles and benefits HCD can bring to social and behaviour change. It's not an exhaustive list, but I think these are some of the really high value things that the process can bring to your programs. So one of the most important things human-centered design can bring to your project is to enable your team to develop an empathetic understanding of your target audience. I really like this quote from Jim Stengel. If you want to understand how a lion hunts, don't go to the zoo, go to the jungle. This quote really sums up for us the importance of truly getting to know and understand the people you're designing for. We do this in several ways, but a common way that we do is by doing community-based immersive fieldwork to gain insight and empathy for the lived experience of those people who are closest to the problem. Some of the methods we use to do this include in-depth interviews, focus groups, observation, and immersion within the community. The photos I'm showing on the screen are from a recent breakthrough action project in northern Nigeria. This project is focusing on how might we radically improve maternal, newborn, child health and nutrition in northern Nigeria. This project is currently mid-flight. We have just finished coming up with initial ideas and prototypes and testing some really low fidelity prototypes with community members. So we are still in the process of further refining those prototypes and implementing them into more of a pilot to really evaluate the feasibility of them. So I'll be referring to this project quite a bit in this presentation, just because it's fresh in my mind, but also some other projects we've been working on. So once we've gone out into the field, collected up our qualitative data, we bring the fieldwork team back together to synthesize the findings. So this is a very interactive, collaborative process where we're pulling out key quotes and themes that have come from our conversations and interviews and observations to then develop insights and opportunity areas to guide the design process. So this process allows us to generate our insights report, which typically will have a description of the key insights as well as the implications and considerations for design. It will also develop up empathy tools to help remind us of our users as we move forward in the design process. So some of these tools are personas, which some of you may be quite familiar with. Also influence maps, journey maps, and audience segmentation matrix or maps are also used. So in this process, we're really trying to understand our target audience, who we're designing for, and make simple tools that we can take throughout this design process to ensure that we're meeting their needs. So the second point I'd like to raise around an important role HCD brings to social and behaviour change is that the process in its iterative nature allows us to generate and refine ideas based on user feedback quite quickly. So another quote which I quite like is, "The essential part of creating is not being afraid to fail." So HCD, it really embraces that saying, and it's an action learning approach. We appreciate the importance of failing fast to learn and improve. We don't see failure, especially quick early failure, as a big barrier or problem for our projects. We learn from it and we recover from our failure to improve our designs. So the iterative process involves generating ideas, refining them into concepts, and developing low fidelity prototypes to test. Here you can see some more images from an ideas generation workshop we held in northern Nigeria. This workshop involved community members, partners, community leaders, and the design and test fieldwork team, to using the insights and opportunities identified during our discovery research to come up with some new ideas and opportunities to test over the following weeks. So as you can see, we moved from rapid ideas on post-it notes to more fleshed out ideas on idea sheets, to then really low fidelity prototypes using different materials, modeling clay, paper cups, anything we could really get our hands on in northern Nigeria. So low fidelity prototypes, they can definitely vary based on what you're testing. So you can use really simple models like the previous photo. You can use card sort activities, especially if your idea isn't fully formed and you're trying to understand things a little bit better, or user preferences. Card sort activities are really helpful. It could be really simple wireframes or storyboards. Anything you can take out into the community to share your idea and discuss your idea to get feedback is really what we're looking for at this early stage of testing. So as we continue to learn and test, our prototypes increase in fidelity. So as you can see, the book on the left is sketches. It's really a low fidelity book, and as we tested and refined the prototype, we could move into developing up some pages that were proving to work well. So it is a process where, as you continue to test, your prototype will continue to develop and the fidelity will increase. Throughout this process, we're really assessing our prototypes through these three lenses. So wanting to see if it's desirable, it's user-friendly, if it's possible, if there's structures in place to support that intervention, and if it's viable. Is it sustainable? Can we do it within resources and financial constraints? So these three lenses are really important as we work out what ideas and prototypes to continue to develop and take forward. The last benefit of HCD I'd like to discuss is its ability to build trust and shared ownership. And this is through its collaborative nature, essentially. So by bringing people along the design process, it creates shared understanding. It can create buy-in. It can create ownership of ideas and interventions that we're implementing in these communities. Our design processes typically include the 4 voices of design. So the voice of intent. So the voice of intent includes our program funders, donors, government organizations, the government itself, any key decision makers that we need to work with. The voice of experience, that is the people who are on the ground experiencing the problems. So our community members, our service providers, our community leaders, our aunts, uncles, mother-in-laws, co-wives, everyone who is interacting with the problem space on a day-to-day basis and influencing our target audience's behaviours are people that we need to involve and understand more about. The third voice is the voice of expertise. So the voice of expertise are our peers, it's subject matter experts who have been working in these spaces for a number of years. It's the literature. So we want to leverage that known knowledge and understanding and bring that into the conversation as well. The fourth voice is the voice of design. And that's really the role of the voice of design, is to bring the other 3 voices together and to facilitate the design process. We find when working in communities where there is low trust, we may not have worked there before, we may not have strong relationships built within the community, we do need to go slower and probably act intentionally in a more collaborative way. So making sure that you're following any appropriate community entry protocols, engaging with traditional and religious leaders, as in many communities, they are the gateway to the community and for your work having any ability to make traction. So we're very mindful that the people we're designing for, we really need to be designing with. A lot of the time, they're the experts in their own lives. So some of the greatest ideas definitely come from the ground. So I urge you, if you can, take a more human-centered approach to developing your SBC programs and interventions. It will be definitely worth your while. So that brings us to the end of my quite quick presentation on HCD's role in SBC. I hope it's given you some insight to what human-centered design can bring to social and behavior change. I feel it's just the beginning of a wider discussion, and excited to check the comments below to see what are some of the burning questions out there. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'll just check the video comments. So Katrina has asked if the I'm interested in learning about specific case studies of using HCD to design tools used in social and behavioural change programs relating to gender, violence, and/or health-seeking norms. Thanks for your comment, Katrina. I hope some of the examples I've used in this presentation go some way into shedding insight to the tools we've used in relation to gender, violence, and health-seeking norms. Those three topics came up a lot in our recent fieldwork in northern Nigeria around maternal, newborn, child health and nutrition. So I'm happy to get in contact with you and share some of those resources. My key top things when it comes to how we've approached those particular issues during HCD is it's important to build that trust and understanding with the user, especially if they have low levels of empowerment or agency around decision making, access to healthcare. We understand, like especially in some parts of the world, like northern Nigeria, there's a whole ecosystem of decision makers and influencers sitting around the mother and the child. So we were very mindful of that, and we worked really closely with community leaders, husbands, mother-in-laws, traditional birthing assistants to really understand their perspectives on MNCH+N, as well as what their role and influence was in the community. And by unearthing that, we realized that some of our assumed target audiences weren't going to be as effective, and we needed to really go after target audiences that had a lot more influence in the community. So for example, while the behavior we were wanting to influence was probably more around the behavior of the young or new mother. However, in some cases, that young new mother does not have agency to make those decisions regarding her health or her child's health. So in that case, we really need to target the decision makers and the influencers to really influence their behaviors relating to MNCH+N. So I hope that goes a little bit into answering that one for you, Katrina. I'm happy to chat about that project in more detail and other projects and how we have addressed gender violence and health-seeking norms. I also have a question here from Heather. How does HCD differentiate itself from SBC more broadly, especially the formative research and pre-testing that usually occurs during SBC campaigns? That's a good question. I see a lot of synergies between the two processes. I see a critical difference is with the HCD approach. It is deeply focused on that user perspective and has more willingness to let the user guide the process a little more. So when we talk about co-design and bringing community members right into the design team so that they have an ability to participate in idea generation and also to provide feedback on low fidelity prototypes. But I do see a lot of similarities, and I think that's why we're seeing quite exciting outcomes using HCD in social and behavior change. So another question is from Susan, and I hope she has now been able to access the video, but the question was, is anyone online and unable to see the video right now? So I hope the live stream has all gone well. This is our first live stream for the day, so apologies for any technical difficulties. These discussions will be posted online. And so you're more than welcome to add comments, and I will jump back in and try to respond to you as soon as possible. I've also put together just a number of frequently asked questions that I am commonly asked. The first being, are there any times when you shouldn't use human-centered design? So I'd like to say never, but there are definitely preferable enabling environments for human-centered design. So the process is very flexible and adaptable, but it does require genuine participation. So willingness of people to make change happen and be part of that change and come up with new ideas. And it also requires the willingness to tolerate ambiguity. So if your program already has pre-defined interventions or ideas, while I would recommend you test and find out more about them, but if you know it's set and it's already got the green light and there's a commitment to run with it, then there's probably not as much value in bringing those people into the conversation. So one of the benefits human-centered design brings is people participate genuinely, and so their voices are heard as much as possible. And if it comes across that the process isn't genuine and their input is not being recognized or valued, then there can be huge trust and implications for the project. So there are some times when I probably wouldn't recommend human-centered design, but generally the process is very flexible, very adaptable, and can be used to address all different sorts of challenges and in different locations as well. Another question I often get asked is, how long does a HCD process take? That's a really good question, and it's actually a really difficult question to give a set time frame for. The process is highly flexible, so the time will change from project to project. It really depends on the complexity of the design challenge or the problem area. Depending on that complexity, the process could take anywhere between a one-day workshop to 1 year or more. So focused or really simple problems could be tackled in a one-day workshop if the right stakeholders are in the room. More complex or long-term program design, HCD processes, they should really invest a good amount of time to properly understand the problem, design and test prototypes, and then implement and evaluate those. So anywhere, depending on the complexity, from 6 weeks to 6 months and onwards, it really does vary depending on what your problem area is. But if you have a project in mind, feel free to reach out to me, and I can probably work with you to understand what a HCD process might look like for that particular program or design challenge. Another common question I get asked is, and it's around when we're going out to test some really early ideas, and the prototypes could almost be on the back of a napkin, or it's really low fidelity, and some people do raise concerns about, is it risky to go to stakeholders or the community with ideas that aren't fully formed or low fidelity prototypes? I come from a graphic design background, so it took a lot for me to embrace not showing perfect, pixel perfect products, but approaching stakeholders when we haven't fully worked through a problem is probably the best time to approach stakeholders. So they can help you to see things from new perspectives, refine your idea. They can really help improve your idea or prototype. So please, I don't think there's any time not to, there's no time too early to involve stakeholders in getting their feedback. It can really de-risk essentially your ideas and prototypes, because it will be through those conversations you'll understand if there's potential or energy for them to work pretty early on, which is important. And lastly, is a question I get when we're bringing along users and stakeholders into the design process. And sometimes people might be concerned that we can't give users everything they want. And so the question becomes, how do we manage expectations with participants in a design process? And quite simply, it's really, human-centered design isn't about asking users what they want. It's understanding what they may need. It's a systemic approach to bringing users' perspective into the design process. And not just the user's perspective, but the policymaker's perspective, the program funder's perspective, the subject matter expert's perspective. So the process is really about bringing all those different perspectives together to understand how we can create a program or an intervention that will be a win-win for the government, the programs, the users, so maximizing program intent while meeting the needs of end users. So yeah, I think that you do need to manage expectations, but in a collaborative process, people will be brought along that process, which helps to manage expectations as well. So I'll just have one last check if there's any more questions that have been posted.
And I believe there is one from Susan who's asking, has HCD been especially successful with certain types of audiences over others? And if so, why?
Thanks, Susan. I have seen success in a whole range of different audiences, but a few that jump to mind is youth. And I think that's typically because they're rarely an audience that is included in these processes of developing interventions. And there's a lot of energy and excitement with youth in terms of generating ideas and testing prototypes. So I definitely have found adolescents and youth to be particularly engaged in an HCD process, which has led to some really cool fresh thinking and new ideas coming out of those projects. I hope that's gone some way to answering your question, Susan. So we've still got a bit of time, so I'm happy to take any more questions from the group.
Maybe we can give a couple more minutes to anybody else who wants to type in any questions. If people have questions later on throughout the day, as Anna said earlier, she will be available online to answer questions over the next few days. Anna, it looks like Susan has another question. She just said, do you have any great stories about HCD that you can share?
Sure. I think just because it's still fresh in my mind is our recent work in northern Nigeria with the Breakthrough Action Nigeria team. So we were working in Sokoto, Kebbi, and Bauchi states. And due to the time we had and the different locations we were wanting to reach during our discovery research, so typical kind of formative research of the project, as well as challenges around language, we required a fieldwork team, which in the end was about 50 people. It was by far the largest group team that I've taken out into the field to conduct discovery research. And all up, we had 4 weeks and 3 days of capacity strengthening prior to the fieldwork, and some very long days and long nights, but it was well worth it in the end. We were very happy with the insights and opportunities that the team was able to unearth through their interviews and observations in the communities. And we've since been back to generate ideas and prototypes, as you would have seen in the discussion presentation. So it was quite chaotic, but it was, a great experience, a lot of fun, and I learned a lot from the team. So yeah, that was quite interesting and fun at the same time.
Okay, Anna, it looks like we have another question from Collins. He's asking, he said, sorry, I probably missed it, but I would appreciate if you could quickly recap a response to the question of how HCD differentiates itself from SBC more broadly, especially the formative research and pretesting that usually occurs.
Sure. So how I kind of answered that one earlier was I feel they are very similar. So the two approaches aren't completely different. I think they complement each other really well. And part of the work the Breakthrough Action team is doing is the development of the SBC Flow Chart, which aims to provide a process where you can leverage all those different SBC methodologies, whether it's human-centered design, collective action, whether it's behavioral economics, to all bring them together so that we can leverage all these different powerful methodologies. The main difference I see with the human-centered design approach is the fact that it really anchors the project, or the process, I should say, around the target audience. So the user at the end of the day, so the person we're designing for, they're who we are designing with. So especially when we go out and start developing ideas, we bring we go out to the community, we bring in community leaders, key stakeholders, community members, partner organizations to help us develop those ideas and build on those ideas. And then we go out and we test them quite quickly with communities. So we might be taking rough sketches out one day. The next day we might have worked on that overnight based on what we've learned, and we take a more refined prototype out to test. So I think there's some nuances in how we go about doing things, but I definitely think they're not exclusive, and there's key benefits to both approaches. And I think the real power is how can we bring our different methods together to have greater impact in our programs.
Thanks, Anna. Could you also speak a little bit more about the SBC flow chart that you were mentioning?
Sure. I almost put this one in the presentation, but I just wasn't sure how familiar the audience is with it, but it's super exciting. Breakthrough Action has been working on a flowchart that, as I mentioned, brings together the different consortium partners' methodologies. So we have, at this stage, been implementing it in various countries, including Zambia, Nigeria, Guyana, Jamaica, just to name a few. And so we hope in the coming months to be able to share a bit more of that with you all, including some toolkits and methods and some ideas and tools you can bring into your own program. So watch this space. Definitely keen to share more about that with the wider team who's been working on the flowchart, but it is very exciting.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Anna, for joining us today. As we mentioned earlier, the discussion threads will still be available, and Anna, along with some other members from Think Place and Think Action, will be responding to questions or comments over the next few days. So please do feel free, once you have a chance to watch this, or once you have a chance to think about things a little bit more, to continue posting questions and sharing your own experiences. Again, Anna, thank you so much for joining us, and we will start our next session in about 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks for joining, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.